I trusted my aunt more than anyone after my parents passed away, but years later I found out she was using the inheritance meant for my education to fund her own children's lives, leaving me struggling financially and wondering if the woman I looked to as a guardian ever truly loved me or just saw me as a burden. My name is David and I'm 28 years old. 8 years ago my parents died in a car accident when I was 20, leaving me completely alone except for my Aunt Margaret. She was my mom's older sister and after the funeral, she pulled me aside with tears in her eyes. David, honey, are not alone. Her family and family takes care of family. I believed her. God, I believed her with every broken piece of my heart. The insurance payout was substantial, the 180,000 told. My parents had been smart about their finances, always talking about my future, my education, making sure I'd be okay if something happened to them. They'd worked double shifts and saved every penny they could spare so I could go to college without drowning in debt. Aunt Margaret sat me down in her pristine living room, tissues in hand, explaining how she'd handle everything. Her grieving, sweetheart. Let me take care of the financial stuff. I'll set an education fund for. When ready for graduate school or whatever comes next, it'll all be there waiting. She had 2 kids of her own. Marcus, who was 16 then, and little Emma, who was 12. I'd spent countless holidays at their house growing. Uncle Rob always grilled burgers and Aunt Margaret made the best apple pie I'd ever tasted. They felt like the only real family I had left. Just focus on finishing undergraduate degree, she said, squeezing my hand. Everything else will work itself out. I was so grateful. So incredibly grateful that I wasn't completely alone in the world. I signed every paper she put in front of me without reading them. I trusted her more than I'd ever trusted another human being. The first year after my parents died was brutal. I was struggling to stay afloat in college, working part-time jobs just to cover basic expenses, but every time money got tight, I reminded that my future was secure. My parents' sacrifice wouldn't be. Aunt Margaret checked on me regularly. She'd call every few weeks asking how school was going, if I needed anything. Sometimes she'd even send care packages with homemade cookies and little notes that said things like, "Parents would be so proud of." I started dating Sarah during my junior year. She was smart, kind, and patient with my grief episodes. When I told her about Margaret was managing my inheritance, Sarah seemed impressed. "You're so lucky to have someone who cares about like that," she said. "Not everyone would step the way she has." I agreed completely. I felt lucky. Blessed even. During family gatherings, I noticed things but didn't admit much of them at the time. Marcus suddenly had a brand new car for his 17th birthday. Emma got a horse. An actual horse. Uncle Rob started talking about the business expansion he was planning. They moved to a bigger house across town. Business is really picking. Aunt Margaret would explain when I'd compliment their new things. Rob's construction company is finally taking off. I was happy for them. They deserved good things. And I was still so focused on getting through each day without my parents that I wasn't paying attention to the details. The summer before my senior year, I decided I wanted to pursue a master's degree in engineering. I'd been accepted to a program that would cost about 40,000 total, and I was excited to finally tap into the education fund Aunt Margaret had set for me. "I'm ready to use some of that money," I told her over dinner at her house. "The graduate program starts in the fall." Something flickered across her face. Just for a second, but I caught it. She looked almost panicked, but then she smiled and patted my hand. "Course, sweetheart. Let me look into the best way to access those funds. These things take time. Know how paperwork is." Weeks passed. Every time I broached it, she had another excuse. The bank was being slow. There were complications with the account. She was waiting for some documents to be processed. Meanwhile, Emma got a whole new wardrobe for starting high school, and Marcus was talking about the college fund they'd set for him. "Mom and Dad have been saving for my education since I was little," he mentioned casually during a family barbecue. "They want to make sure I can go anywhere I want without student loans." That's when the first real doubt crept in. A tiny, horrible thought that I immediately pushed away because it felt like betraying the one person who'd shown me love after losing everything. But once that seed of suspicion was planted, I couldn't stop noticing things. The timing of their house purchase. The way Aunt Margaret deflected whenever I brought specific numbers about the inheritance. The fact that she'd never once shown me any paperwork or account statements. I started having nightmares where I discovered the money was gone, but I'd wake feeling guilty for doubting her. This was the woman who'd held me while I sobbed at my parents' funeral. The woman who'd promised to take care of me when I had no one else. By December of my senior year, I was getting desperate. I needed to know exactly what was available for graduate school applications and funding. I decided to surprise Aunt Margaret with a visit to finally sit down and go through all the financial details together. I drove to her house on a Saturday morning, planning to take her out for coffee and have a real conversation about my future. But when I pulled into her driveway, I saw something that made my stomach drop. A brand new Mercedes SUV was parked next to Uncle Rob's truck. As I sat there staring at it, Marcus came jogging out of the house wearing expensive athletic gear I'd never seen before. "Hey cussin'," he called out, not seeming at all surprised to see me. "Mom's inside dealing with Emma's college prep stuff. Did know they have these crazy expensive SAT prep courses now. But Mom says it's worth it to invest in our education." I walked into that house feeling like I was walking toward the edge of a cliff, and I was about to discover just how far the fall would be. I found Aunt Margaret in her home office, surrounded by college brochures and financial documents. When she looked and saw me standing in the doorway, her face went completely white. "David, I wasn't expecting Bob." "I can see that," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "About the education fund." She started shuffling papers around nervously. "Of course, honey. I've been meaning to call about that. There have been some complications." "What kind of complications?" That's when I saw it. Sitting right there on her desk, partially covered by Emma's college prep materials, was a bank statement. My eyes caught my father's name on it, and before I could stop I stepped closer. "David, don't." But it was too late. I could see enough to make my heart stop. The account that was supposed to contain my inheritance showed a 3-847. "Where is it?" My voice came out as barely a whisper. "Where is my parents' money?" Aunt Margaret started crying immediately, but they weren't the same tears she'd cried at my parents' funeral. These were tears of guilt and panic. "I can explain. It's not what it looks like, then explain it." Explain to me why there's less than $4,000 left of the $180,000 my parents died trying to save for me. She couldn't look me in the eye. I borrowed some of it. For emergencies. I was always planning to pay it back. Emergencies. Like Marcus's car. Like Emma's horse. Like this house. Don't understand the pressure I was under. Rob's business was failing, and we were going to lose everything. I just needed to borrow against fund temporarily. The word temporarily hit me like a physical. I sat down hard in the chair across from her desk because my legs wouldn't hold me anymore. How long? I asked. How long have been stealing from me? I'm not stealing. I'm family. I raised after parents died. Didn't raise me. I was 20 years old. Just took care of some paperwork and invited me to holidays. That's when the whole truth came spilling out. She'd started using the money within 6 months of my parents. First just a few thousand for household expenses while I was grieving and not paying attention. Then larger amounts when Uncle Rob's construction business started hemorrhaging money. Marcus's car $35,000 from my inheritance. Emma's horse and riding lesson $18,000. The down payment on their new house is $60,000. Marcus's private school tuition at $20,000. Emma's dance competition and costumes $12,000. She'd spent 8 years systematically draining the money my parents had died trying to save for me. All while looking me in the eye and promising it would be there when I needed it. I thought Rob's business would turn around. She sobbed. I thought we'd be able to pay it all back before needed it. Before I needed it. I've needed it this whole time. Do know how many nights I've worked double shifts just to afford groceries. Do know how many opportunities I've missed because I was waiting for to handle the paperwork. But the worst part wasn't the money, as devastating as that was. The worst part was the look on her face when I confronted her. It wasn't remorse for betraying my trust. It was panic about being caught. We're never gonna tell me where. I realized out loud. We're going to let me believe that money was there until the day I tried to access it, and then what? Do you have come with some story about market crashes or bad investments? She didn't answer, but her silence was answer enough. I called Sarah from my car in Aunt Margaret's driveway, shaking so hard I could barely dial the number. She took it all, I told her. 8 years of lying to my face, and she took everything. Sarah drove over immediately and found me sitting on the curb outside that house, the house my inheritance had helped buy completely falling apart. What are going to do? She asked. That was the question, wasn't it? What do when the person trusted most in the world systematically destroys future while pretending to protect it? I went to see a lawyer the next Monday. He reviewed all the documents I'd signed, all the financial records I could gather, and gave me the news I was dreading. Legally, she had power of attorney over the funds, he explained. And while what she did was morally reprehensible, proving financial after this length of time, with consent on the original documents, would be extremely difficult and expensive. So she just gets away with it. I'm sorry. Sometimes family betrayal falls into legal gray areas that are nearly impossible to prosecute. I could have fought it. I could have spent years and thousands more dollars I didn't have trying to hold her accountable. But I was 28 years old, emotionally destroyed, and facing the reality that my future had been stolen by the one person I'd believed would never me. That night I sat Sarah down and told her everything. I can't afford graduate school. I can't afford much of anything really. The I thought we were building together was built on a lie. Sarah held me while I cried harder than I had since my parents' funeral. But even in her arms I felt completely alone. The safety net I'd believed in for 8 years had never existed. A week later Marcus called me, not to apologize, but to ask if I was going to make trouble for the family over this. Make trouble, I repeated, incredulous. Mom's really upset. Emma doesn't understand why being so mean to her. That's when I realized that in their minds I was the problem. I was the ungrateful family member causing drama over money. They'd lived with my inheritance for so long that they genuinely started to think of it as theirs. I hung on him and blocked all their numbers. But the damage was done, and it went so much deeper than just the money. 6 months after discovering the truth, I was a different person entirely. Sarah tried to be supportive, but I could see the way my constant bitterness and anger were wearing on her. Every conversation somehow circled back to what Aunt Margaret had done to me. Every financial stress became a reminder of what should have been mine. Need to find a way to move forward. Sarah said gently one evening. I know what happened was terrible, but can't live in this anger forever. She was right, but I didn't know how to let it go. How to move forward when the foundation of everything believed about family, trust and love turns out to be built on lies. I started avoiding family events entirely, which meant avoiding the few extended family members I had left. Word got around quickly about her, between me and Aunt Margaret, but of course, her version of events painted me as the ungrateful nephew who was demanding money that, the family, had needed for emergencies. My cousin Lisa, who I'd been close to growing, called me one day. I heard about what happened with Aunt Margaret, she said. But David, family is family, maybe could work something out. I'm sure she didn't mean to point. That conversation taught me something devastating about how the world sees financial within families. Because Aunt Margaret was older, because she'd taken me in, after my parents died, because family money is seen as communal property by some people, my anger was viewed as selfish rather than justified. I was completely alone, and worse than that, I was painted as the villain in my own story. Sarah and I broke 8 months later. Not because she didn't love me, but because living with someone consumed by betrayal and rage was destroying her mental health too. I can't save from this pain, she said through tears as she packed her things. And I can't watch Destroy over it anymore. Losing Sarah felt like losing my parents all over again, except this time it was my fault. My inability to process what Aunt Margaret had done to me had cost me the one healthy relationship I had left. I into work, taking on extra hours and side projects to make for the financial security I'd lost. I was making decent money, but I was also 28 years old with no savings, no safety net and no family support. Every financial decision felt precarious in a way my parents had tried so hard to prevent. The worst part was the holidays. For 8 years, even while grieving my parents, I'd had somewhere to go for Christmas and Thanksgiving. Aunt Margaret's house had felt like home. Now I spent holidays alone, scrolling through social media, and seeing pictures of Marcus and Emma celebrating with their parents. The parents who'd stolen my future to fund their children's dreams. Emma had gotten into her dream college, a private school that cost $55,000 a year. Marcus was planning to start his own business with the family support. He'd always been promised. Neither of them had student loans. Neither of them would graduate with debt. Neither of them had to work double shifts just to afford basic living expenses. They got to live that my parents had died trying to give me. 2 years after the confrontation, I found out through mutual family friends that Aunt Margaret had been telling people I was going through a difficult time, and that she was praying for me to find peace. She'd turned my victimization into evidence of my character flaws. I started seeing a therapist, partly because I was having panic about money and partly because I was beginning to understand that the betrayal had broken something fundamental in my ability to trust people. It's not just about the money, Dr. Stevens explained during one of our sessions. It's about the fact that the person who was supposed to protect after greatest loss was actually victimizing the entire time. That kind of betrayal rewires brain's ability to feel safe with other people. She was right. I'd started viewing every kindness with suspicion. Every new relationship felt dangerous. Every person who offered help seemed like they might be angling to take advantage of me somehow. I was 30 years old, completely alone, and unable to trust anyone enough to build a real relationship. Last month, I heard that Uncle Rob's construction business was thriving now. They'd used my inheritance as startup capital to get through their rough patch, and now they were one of the most successful contractors in town. Marcus had joined the business and was being groomed to take it over someday. My parents' money had literally built the foundation of their family's success. I could have been a mechanical engineer by now. I could have had the career my parents dreamed of, the financial stability they'd worked so hard to provide. Instead, I'm an administrative assistant with trust issues and no family, watching from the sidelines as the people who destroyed my future prosper from their betrayal. Sometimes I wonder what my parents would think if they knew. Would they be heartbroken that their sister had stolen from their son? Would they be disappointed in me for not fighting harder? Would they understand why I can't seem to move past it? I think about writing Aunt Margaret a letter sometimes. Not to ask for money, because I know that's gone forever. But just to tell her that she didn't just steal my inheritance. She stole my ability to believe that people can love without. She stole my faith and family. She stole the sense of security my parents died trying to give me. But I never write the letter, because I know she'd just see it as more evidence that I'm bitter and ungrateful. The truth is I am bitter. I'm bitter that the person I trusted most in the world saw my grief as an opportunity. I'm bitter that my parents' sacrifice was turned into someone else's children's college fund. I'm bitter that I'm 30 years old and starting from zero because the woman who promised to protect me spent 8 years systematically destroying my future while looking me in the eye and lying about it. Most of all, I'm bitter that she took something from me that can never be restored. The ability to believe that family means safety. People always say that family is supposed to be the people who have back no matter what. But what happens when family is the in back? What happens when the person who was supposed to love unconditionally decides that future is worth less than their children's immediate comfort? I guess what I'm trying to say is this: be careful who trust with. Because sometimes the people who promise to protect are the ones planning to destroy. And once that trust is broken, can't unbreak it, no matter how much want to believe in love again.